Hi, this is Sung from Sky Academy, and in the last episode what we did was we kind of looked a little bit at limits, and we kind of did like a brief introduction to it. I don't know how much of it you understood, so if you do go back, if you're still stuck, go back and have a rewatch that video, and I'm sure things will be a little bit clearer. But this particular episode, I'm actually going to spend a little bit more time on limits, right? And I'm going to do that by way of showing you how they work on a graph, right? And the graph that I'm going to show you, or kind of use to demonstrate limits, is the graph y is equal to 1 on x. And you will be very familiar with that if you did advanced maths in year 10, because of course this is a hyperbola. Okay, and this is a great graph to demonstrate limits on, and so let's get started. Okay, now the thing with this particular graph is we're going to look at what happens when x approaches positive infinity. Now, as x approaches positive infinity, all right, or as x approaches an infinitely large number, which is really what's going on, as x get bigger and bigger and bigger, what's happening to y, right? What you get is 1 over 2, which is a half, 1 over 1, which is 1, 1 over 2, which is a half, 1 over 4, which is a quarter, 1 over 8, which is an eighth, 1 over 1,000, which is 1 over 1,000, right? You're getting smaller and smaller until you approach 0. So what's happening is as x approaches positive infinity, y is approaching 0, and it's approaching 0 from above. And we show that it's approaching 0 from above by putting a little positive sign above the 0. And so what's going on is you're starting here and you're approaching 0 from above until you get to 0. Okay? As x approaches negative infinity, what's going on is that this graph, right, is doing the same thing, but instead of approaching from above, it's approaching from below. So -1, -1/2, -1/4, -1/8, -1 over 1,000, etc. It's kind of shooting off towards 0, but it's approaching 0 from below, going up. So y approaches 0 from below. Does that make sense? Okay. Now the other thing that we're interested in is what happens when x approaches 0. This time we're going to look at what happens as x approaches 0, and we're going to see what happens as x approaches 0 from the right. So in other words, from the positive x-axis. So x approaches 0 from the right. What happens is y shoots off to infinity. And not just infinity, the positive part of infinity, right? So y approaches a positive infinity, and if we were to look at what happens as x approaches 0 from below, what happens is that y will approach negative infinity, an infinitely large negative number, or an infinitely small negative number, if that's what you want to think of it that way. Okay, so the key thing with these is that it's not going to be equal at any point to these infinite numbers. Okay, and it's not even going to be equal to 0, even though it approaches 0. Okay, so as x approaches 0 from above and from the right, and as x approaches 0 from the left, y is going to approach infinity. But is it going to reach infinity ever? No. And is it ever going to reach 0 or -0? No, because at 0 the function is undefined, right? But that doesn't stop us from using our limits to see where the function is headed when we consider what happens as x approaches to 0 or as x approaches to positive and negative infinity. So this is really what limits is all about. Thank you.